Hello Horror Hounds, it's a happy return to a Mario Bava film for this video, 1971's A Bay of Blood, aka Bloodbath. I just prefer this cover from Arrow videos, aka Twitch of the Death Nerve, the best title ever. Sometimes also it was shown around Grindhouse cinemas in the US as Last House on the Left 2. It's got tons and tons and tons of titles. It's a film that reportedly Bava was very passionate about, and it's a passion that you can see on the screen. The film is alive with it, despite a very restrictive budget and a very short film time. This is a real example of necessity being the mother of invention, because with much less money than he probably would have liked, and much less time than he would have liked to shoot it. Apparently, one of the locations, in and around one of the locations, was some property owned by the producer that they could just use because the producer owned it. Apparently, for some of the dolly shots, they just had to put a camera on a child's cart or wheeled chair and wheel that around because they just didn't have the money. Out of that comes not only one of the most fun and wild, but within the context of horror cinema, one of the most vital and influential movies that there has pretty much been in horror cinema. That is a bold boast, Andrew. It's a bold boast. Prove it. This movie draws a line from, I'm going to say, right back to 1939 and Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, previously known as 10 Little Indians, and originally titled something that is even less acceptable nowadays. But I'd say it draws a line from that all the way through the giallo tradition that he helped kickstart and shape and mould, takes that giallo tradition and points from there directly towards the next big movement in horror cinema. I would say American horror cinema's probably biggest contribution to the genre, the slasher. Bava here is giving an admit one ticket to any US filmmaker that wants to take the door he's kicked open here and run with it. And goodness me, some did. Some say that the first slasher film is Halloween. It's not. To my mind, at least, it's Bob Clark's Black Christmas, which I've also reviewed here on this channel. An amazing film that takes specifically the camera zooming in on a hidden staring eye from this movie. But after Black Christmas, Sean S. Cunningham, a guy who claims not to have seen this movie when making Friday the 13th and Friday the 13th Part 2, I call bullshit on that. When the same distributors that distributed your first movie, Last House on the Left, run this flick as Last House on the Left Part 2, I think you might show a tiny little bit of interest in seeing it. So yes, Sean Cunningham borrowed liberally from this movie for Fridays 1 and 2, but to give the man his due, what he also did was he pared down the formula, the format. He sort of distilled it into an essence which sort of made it into the aerodynamic sort of shark of slasher movies that Friday the 13th was, and that spawned so many imitations and a whole subgenre within horror of slasher movies. They used to be called stalk and slash movies, didn't they? Am I going crazy? Didn't they used to be referred to as stalk and slash? And now it's just slashers. Everything's becoming abbreviated. Lol. So let's talk about the granddaddy, Bay of Blood. It says Bloodbath there. Let me take this out. I don't like the Bay of Blood cover. That image is my preferred image, but it's not one of the two covers. This film is a blast. The opening kill's probably the most stylish and the most stylized, and I think purposefully so. This film has got a wicked sense of humour, and I think it's displayed admirably in the opening murder, which sets out its stall very much like a traditional giallo movie. There are hints of Hitchcock here. Some reviewers say that this scene with the Contessa in her wheelchair in her mansion, hearing a noise, wheeling here, going over there, the rope coming out, hanging her, kicking the wheelchair away, owes much to Hitchcock. Maybe in the second half when there's a body to deal with. Hitchcock did like the ramifications of murder and having to deal with bodies. What Hitchcock also liked to do was to show the audience that there was a murderer in the room as well before the victim knew it, to ramp up the tension. We don't get any of that convention here, so maybe Hitchcock, I don't know. To me it reads more like the kind of giallo stuff that Bava, and by that point Argento and the like would have been doing, and everyone would have known the conventions. And after the Contessa's killed, we see feet walking into frame, and the camera pulls up to the traditional black gloved hands, and everyone knows where we are at this stage, right? We're all nice and comfortable, but then the camera keeps moving up and the killer's revealed, which doesn't happen till the end of the movie, does it? And then probably less than a minute later, the killer himself is stabbed to death by another hidden non-identity revealed killer. And it's just, I think it's just a sly wink to, okay, here's the standard giallo opening, and here's your black gloved giallo killer, and now we're going to show you who he is, and now we're going to kill you, and now we're going to go on a crazy roller coaster ride of death, murder and mayhem. And it does get crazy. Bava's camera in this is always restless, always moving, and as a viewer you can never settle down into a point of view. Sometimes you're sort of an omniscient, all-seeing eye, sometimes you're the point of view of someone, sometimes the camera's guiding you over to something that someone you were watching hasn't noticed, but it's always tracking left or right, or pushing in and pulling out and floating around. Weirdly makes you feel incredibly disembodied, like you're observing all of this and absolutely unable to influence, and the camera will show you something, and then lots of times it'll pan across a room, bring out little details, pull back, and then show you something that was hidden. There's another section that some of you I might lose a couple of you here, but bear with me. Reminded me of point and click adventure games. He likes to, in this movie, and I guess it's because there's not the time and there's not the money to do really complex shots. So he'll end a scene by zooming in on something and then pulling out of focus, and then it'll cut to the next scene which is out of focus, and then the focus will come back in and you're somewhere else. And it mimics a sort of dreamlike progression, but also a sort of computer game progression. There's one scene specifically where we know that there's a couple in a room making love, and we start off outside the house, and then the camera moves into the window, and then goes out of focus, and then we're inside, and the camera drifts around, and then pulls in on the spear, and then we're in the hall just outside the bedroom, and it does the same, focuses in, it goes woozy on the ajar door, and then we're inside the room. It's like if you were in a computer game, you see the house and then you click on the door, and then the next screen it takes you to is inside that room, and you can look around, and, oh, there's a spear, click on that, we'll pick that up, and then click through the door and we're in the hallway. Oh, and there's a bedroom door, and the door's ajar, we'll click on the open door, and then we'll move further into the bedroom and explore. And it's that kind of dispassionate sort of third person view that is, as I say, out of necessity, but it adds a restless quality, and it adds to my feeling that all of the people at the titular bay are sort of trapped in this environment together, unable to escape each other's orbits, and we're sort of there observing, very much like one of the characters is an entomologist and collects insects. Very early on in the film, we see him at his desk, and he's got a little petri dish with some water in it and a lid on it, and there are some water boatmen in there, and all they can do is swim around and bump into each other and bump into the walls, and they can never escape. It's very much like all the characters sort of drawn to this bay, because there's a matter of a will and who can inherit the property after the Countess dies, and it's a lucrative bit of land, and they're all drawn to the bay, and once they're there and they're trapped there, they all bump into each other and can't escape each other's orbits, and eventually tear each other to pieces. We're also shown, by the way, one of his insects on its back, pinned to a display board, but still alive with its legs wriggling. I wish Italian directors would stop filming the torture and killing of creatures for their films, but there you have it. The link between the insects he's capturing, killing and studying, and the humans in the bay that we are studying and watching being killed off one by one. The parallels are drawn even stronger there, because it's the image of the beetle pierced and stuck to the board is repeated with a scene where the lovers I mentioned before are skewered through. Remember that murder from Friday the 13th Part 2? Yeah, it's from this. The fisherman in it towards the end is speared and pinned to a barn door. Direct lines being drawn to the beetle at the start. The characters in this are the insects that we are studying, and they've all gone crazy. I don't want to bang on too much about the similarities between this and the first two Friday the 13th movies, because every creative endeavour takes its inspiration from art that's come before it, and a bog standard slasher movie from the 80s about camp counselors being hacked up by various different gardening implements is going to be no exception. The only bugbear I have is Sean Cunningham not just coming clean and saying, yes, I saw Bay of Blood in a grindhouse theatre back in the mid to late 70s, expected it to fade without a trace like all of these films were expected to do, didn't predict the DVD and home video and Blu-ray boom. How the hell could I have fucking possibly predicted that? So I didn't realise that everyone would be able to go out and purchase the proof of what inspired me and watch it and go, oh my god, that's exactly the same as Friday the 13th. What's best to do, I think, is really to trumpet a Bay of Blood and champion it. I'm a huge fan of the Friday the 13th movies, so to see a movie that so clearly has an inspiration and is so clearly part of the DNA of Friday the 13th, potentially Black Christmas, which is a superb movie, up, down, left and right in its own right. Check out my review, but more importantly, check out the movie, not the remake. That's a piece of shit. Don't fall for that trap. It's just a joy to watch this movie, which takes the genre tradition and then just goes completely bravura with it, reveling in the deaths and the special effects. If you're a fan of special effects and you're a fan of Tom Savini's work particularly, then you need to check out this movie, because there are gags and effects work in this that inform his work. There's a superb, it's not a machete, but a sort of clawed boat hook thing, but for want of a better word, machete to the face, that a throat cut, there's the spear I mentioned, and it just revels in all of it. And this is what gets distilled down. There's nudity, there's skinny dipping, there's the stalking point of view shots through the trees of people that don't know they're being watched. There's everything taking place by an ominous, dark body of water. There's people that you never know when they're being watched, and they're always being watched, constantly being watched in this film. We're constantly showing people watching other people secretly. All of that gets distilled down into its basic elements and then repackaged for Western consumption, and it just, with Friday the 13th, just goes insane, and that just kicks off a whole other spin of the wheel for horror cinema and these type of stories to be told, and then become a bit played out, and then something like maybe Scream will come along, and I don't think we're ever going to get tired of slasher movies. I know I won't, but it's so heartening to see where they came from, what bits later creators decided to take, and what bits they decided to leave to one side, what bits they decided to develop and what bits they didn't. Some would say it's the most basic elements, the base elements of violence, sex and death that they decided to take, but that's fine, and span it on. It's a joy to watch what paved the way for that subgenre. What's even more of a joy is that it's a fabulous movie in its own right. It could have been a chin-stroking curiosity. Oh yeah, so this was an early inspiration for the slasher movies. In and of itself, though, it's so much fun. It revels in itself. It has a wry sense of humour, and if you're a fan of horror movies, and if you're a fan of this kind of on-screen violence, it has a streak of dark humour and a wink, and specifically at you, because you're in the know about this kind of thing, that will go over the heads of people who are just sort of watching it coming in from the cold and don't know about the history of horror films. So it's very inclusive in that way as well, and it revels in being itself, and it's a really good movie.